Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My girlfriend and I get tortured for a living. Something went seriously wrong during her last session, and now she's different. I've always had a bit of a passion for odd jobs. When I was a teenager, I discovered Craigslist, and everything just kind of snowballed from there. You wouldn't believe the kind of things you can find on the internet. The kind of jobs you can secure without having to do any paperwork. Most of the time, the people hiring either don't want to be traceable by the government, or they're just far too desperate at that point to add any additional hoops to jump through. That was how I met Chelsea. It was actually a really funny story, perfect for telling at parties. It would be perfect for our wedding, too, and for telling our kids. It would have been, at least, we met because we had both been hired to come to this birthday party. A kid turning 11. Neither of us fully knew what the job entailed when we agreed, which might have been a sign that we shouldn't have, but we were both informed we'd be paid handsomely, and that was all that either of us needed to hear. When we got there, Frank, a middle-aged guy with a salt and pepper beard, who smelled strongly of petulant marinara sauce, informed us we would get in a huge screaming match around the middle of the party. We were playing a couple from a few houses down who were really on the fritz, I guess. We weren't told why, just what to do. I'm still not sure why he wanted us to do that. I was hesitant. I wasn't much of an actor. But Chelsea, she threw herself into the role wholeheartedly. A couple of hours later, we were sitting on the curb a block away, and she was holding a bag of frozen carrots against my swollen cheekbone, and I was nursing a blunt, wincing at how my chocolate milk-soaked clothing stuck to my skin. We compared stories of our strangest jobs, our craziest experiences, the worst things we'd ever done to make a couple bucks. We both agreed that anything below a felony was fair game, but we gravitated towards weird yet legal and harmless tasks. She had a passion for all of it that I'd never seen in anyone I'd ever met. She was really doing it for the experiences, not the money. She was a thrill seeker. I fell in love with her quickly, like getting hit over the head with a blunt object. It was aggressive and immediate. A couple of months later, we got a place together, and the rest was history. We fell into a nice, domestic routine. She made me coffee in the morning and kissed my forehead when I walked into the kitchen. We took turns cooking dinner and doing the dishes, and we watched hours of reality television slop on our sofa that was just big enough for two. We talked about the future. We talked about a dog and 2 kids, and a yard. It all just fell into place. Her friends like me and my friends like her, and our families were the same. My mother became a little too obsessed with having a grandchild, and I had to beg her to stop asking Chelsea about her cycle. But none of them knew about our secret life, the jobs we did together when everyone went home. It was just for us, and it was exciting, the secret hobby that we shared. The first call from OEM came on a quiet Friday. Chelsea was at her job as a barista, and I was at home getting some cleaning done before having lunch with my parents, like an old person. I was used to getting calls that didn't have identification, considering all my side jobs, so I didn't bat an eye at the NO caller ID on my screen. What was different, however, was the automated message that played as soon as I picked up the call. This call may be recorded for quality assurance and training purposes. Please state your first and last name and your date of birth. I frowned. Tossing a rag I'd been cleaning the stove with onto the kitchen counter. Julian Rains, May 14th, 1999. There was a silence, and then a beep. Then a man spoke, non-automated this time. Hello, Mr. Rains. I've been informed you might be looking for a job. When Chelsea got home, I was waiting for her on the couch. She came up behind me, cupped my face in her hands, and kissed the top of my head. Hey, babe, I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. How was work? Exhausting. She slumped over the back of the couch, smushing the cushions, but I got this crazy voicemail. The facility was in what looked from the outside like a dilapidated warehouse. The man who picked us up in a long black car was very quiet, answering our questions in single-word responses and keeping his eyes on the road. Chelsea and I kept giving each other small glances and squeezing each other's hands the entire way there. A man greeted us at the car door, opening it for us with a smile. He was tall and thin, and he wore a crisp suit with his dark hair slicked back, not a strand askew. Mr. and Mrs. Raines, I presume? Chelsea looked down shyly. I was surprised. She was never shy, but this situation definitely felt more professional than what we were used to. We aren't married. Oh, I'm sorry. The man tapped his forehead with the palm of his hand good-naturedly. I'm so sorry, miss. Sutherland. Miss Sutherland, of course. He reached out to shake her hand, and then mine, eager. My name is Malcolm Kessler. You can just call me Kessler. Would you like to know what you're doing here? We let Kessler lead us into the building. On the inside, it looked far less run down. We were greeted with long white hallways and bustling professionals holding coffees and clipboards, wearing matching white lab coats. Is this like a hospital? Chelsea asked, gazing around in awe. I took her hand again and she gave a squeeze. No, not a hospital, although there are medical professionals here, and we do certainly have access to those kinds of tools. He offered us a sly grin. We entered a room with a metal table and 4 chairs, and not much else. A woman with her hair tied up in a tight bun came in, placed a stack of papers on the table, and scurried away. Kessler gestured for us to take a seat. This, he said slowly, looking from me to Chelsea and back again. This is OEM. Do you know what that stands for? He waited for us to shake our heads before continuing. This is the Office of Enhanced Methods. I blinked at him, the white fluorescent lights making my eyes burn. What does that mean? I'm glad you asked. Kessler leaned back in his seat, folding his hands in his lap. Essentially, here at OEM, we test torture methods. See what works. See what doesn't. See what we need to change or scale back on. You know, I could feel Chelsea looking at me. I looked back. I couldn't quite read her expression, but somehow I still could get the gist. Is this, a government project? She asked, her eyes still locked on mine, and her brows furrowing. Kessler chuckled. You could say that. So why do you need us? I asked, even though I felt I might know the answer, finally looking away from my girlfriend and back at the man in front of us. Kessler sighed, leaning forward again, resting his elbows on the table. He had quite a sharp face, but it managed to feel charming and welcoming purely from his expression. I wondered if he practiced that. I'll level with you, he said, quieter than before. We need volunteers. But finding volunteers for something like this is difficult. That's why now we're looking for people like you, people who are interested in doing odd jobs like this one, and we're offering a large amount of compensation. I pressed my lips together, searching his face for any sign of deception or exaggeration. I found none. I glanced back at Chelsea, who was looking at the stack of paperwork. How much compensation? I asked finally, when it became clear that no one else was going to say it. I expected Kessler to laugh. He didn't. Are you two looking to get married? I felt the room heat up. Truthfully, I had bought the ring a month ago. I was just waiting for the right time, and a time when we could properly plan for a wedding without the stress of becoming bankrupt for it. Yes, I mean, eventually. Have you seen how much those venues cost these days? Kessler raised his eyebrows sympathetically, leaning even closer to us. Not to mention a honeymoon. Are you looking to have kids, start a family, send those kids to college, grow old and retire? The man actually reached out, actually took my hand in one of his and Chelsea's in his other. I felt like the air in the room was being sucked out of it. I'm going to be honest with you too. I am not going to mince words. It's tough out there right now. I could make it so you never have to worry about money again. He left us in the room to let us talk alone, and I could have sworn I heard the lock click behind him, but to be fair, I was feeling pretty jumpy by that point. Chelsea and I sat for a moment in silence. This is a lot, she muttered, running her fingers through her hair. This place is crazy. I reached over to flip through the paperwork. Chewing on my bottom lip, I saw words like non-disclosure agreement, liability, medical care. I put the paperwork back down and took her hand again. It's a lot of money. He seemed serious. Would we be considered like war criminals if we took part in this? She laughed, but I could tell she was anxious. I shrugged slowly. She rubbed at her face with her free hand, a nervous habit of hers. I reached over and tucked some hair behind her ear, smiling. She smiled back apprehensively. There was something neither of us were saying, something neither of us wanted to point out. How bad was the job to offer that amount of compensation? Still, there was a buzz between us. This was what we did. We signed up for strange things with experiences. Chelsea lived for things like this. I think I knew the second we got there that she would end up wanting to do it. When Kessler came back, I stood up, pushing my chair back and wiping my sweaty hands on my jeans. What kind of torture are we talking about? His smile was wide. I can show you now if you like, he explained as he led us back down the hall, guiding us into a different room that was essentially the exact same as the one we had just been in, but with more cameras mounted on the walls and with different chairs. I winced a little when I saw the wrist and ankle restraints attached to the sterile metal frame. Everything we do here stays within these walls, he told us, gesturing for us to take a seat. Chelsea and I shared a look, then obeyed, communication-wise, but also physically. We will do nothing to permanently damage you, and we have medical staff on site for any treatment you may need. As if on cue, a man in one of the lab coats bustled into the room, pushing a cart. He began strapping down our wrists, leaving our legs unrestrained. Everything is voluntary, Kessler continued. Nothing will happen to you without your explicit consent, although we may need to withhold some details in order to get the most accurate read on your reactions. You can leave or discontinue your contracts at any time. The man in the lab coat started putting on medical gloves. I swallowed hard. What is it going to do? Kessler nodded at the man, who procured a syringe from his cart, examining the needle carefully and then picking up a little glass bottle to draw from. This is just, let's call it sample. This is something we've been working on for a while. It's already been tested many times with a high success rate. I wondered what a high success rate in this context was. A large sum of pain? The right amount of screaming? Usually, we probably hook you up to various brainwave sensors, but we'll start light today. The doctor, was he a doctor? Approached Chelsea, who squirmed anxiously. He wiped her arm with an alcohol swab and began feeling around for a good vein. I watched her, trying to look encouraging when her eyes met mine. This is a sort of liquid electrocution, per se. Before either of us could reply to that, the doctor was inserting the needle into Chelsea's arm and pushing down on the plunger. I watched her body seize up, her eyes going wide and glassy. She was perfectly still for a moment, save for her mouth falling open and her entire face going slack. And then she began to twitch and spasm, her limbs jerking with no control. Then she screamed, a gurgling, horrifying sound, and I was struck with panic. I was so distracted, I barely felt the needle sliding into my own arm. And then it felt like I was being set on fire. We didn't go back to that place for a couple of months. Kessler told us to take our time, to think about it, as he handed us a tall stack of dollar bills. The feeling of the money almost bulging out of my pocket almost made up for the pain. He had told the truth. It didn't last. It felt like the effects of the injection lasted an hour, but we were told it had only been a few minutes before it wore off. I expected to be weak leaving the facility, and prepared myself to be embarrassed to handle it worse than my girlfriend did, but the feeling faded fast. In fact, I almost felt more alive. We were given a brief interview, where a younger man scribbled extensive notes, and then we were free to go. The first thing Chelsea said to me when we got outside was, "What a rush!" Still, we waited a while. It felt like a next step in our odd jobs hobby to make this a regular thing, like something a little bit depraved. It was dystopian, it was strange and scary. Even though the sensation was gone, I could vividly remember what the injection had done to me, how it had torn through my veins, how I had wondered if I was dying, and that was supposed to just be a sample. But eventually, neither of us could stay away. The money was good, beyond good. At first, we kept a secret from each other, as if we were doing something bad. She would head off to work, and I would drive to the warehouse. They would inject me, feed me things that made me sick, toss me around, even beat me, and then I would drive home, still reeling and sore. Chelsea started acting strange, staying up after I went to bed, but I couldn't exactly call her out on it, because I was being strange too. Neither of us wanted to put any pressure on the other, I guess. And I don't think either of us liked the idea of the other getting tortured. It was all but confirmed in my mind that we were both doing the same thing when I caught her coming to the front door at almost 3 a.m., rubbing at her temple like she had a horrible migraine. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, waiting for her. She stopped cold, her eyes going wide. I couldn't help but chuckle. Cheating on me? I asked. She laughed, plopping down next to me on the couch. Not exactly. I pulled her to me, and she rested her head on my shoulder. Let's just do it together, okay? From now on, let's just go together. I waited for an answer, but after a minute, all I got was a snore. We went together the next weekend. Kessler greeted us, patting each of us on our backs cheerfully. Great to see you two together again. The work you both have been doing here is just fantastic. Chelsea and I eyed each other, and she gave me a little punch on the arm. I grinned at her. I have something different for you two today, now that you're here together, if you're up for it. My smile faded a little, twisting into mild concern. I licked my lips. Different how? He waved me off, guiding us into one of the rooms. The same chairs greeted us, with their cuffs and restraints. A doctor was already inside, toying with some kind of strap. It looks sort of like a headband. We'd like to try something more psychological than you're used to. I stopped in my tracks. Kessler and Chelsea both turned to face me, their eyebrows raising in sync. Psychological torture? I was getting vivid images in my head. All the psychological horror movies I'd ever seen rushing back to me. Physical pain was one thing, but sanity was delicate, something that shouldn't be played with. Kessler approached me, placing his hands on each of my shoulders, and offered me a reassuring smile. Think about it, Mr. Raines, he said, his voice kind. It will be a brief test. It'll only last around 30 seconds. Like I've said, nothing will leave this facility, and we have professionals to assess your mental state directly afterwards. 30 seconds for enough money to buy a used car. I worried my lips together, the fear I'd had in the past creeping back in. If it wasn't dangerous, why was it worth so much? Worth more than we'd been paid for anything before? Come on, Jules. Chelsea smiled at me from behind him. She didn't look afraid, and it soothed me a little. We'll do it together. I nodded reluctantly. Almost as soon as my chin raised to do so, the doctor was slipping the headband on, 2 metal plates digging into my forehead. I felt my muscles tense up. We took our seats, and Chelsea reached over to grab my hand. They didn't strap us down this time, which I hardly thought about until after it was too late. The doctor put Chelsea's headband on too, and she made a face at me, which made me bite back a laugh. Ready? Kessler asked. Then he nodded at the doctor, who pressed something on what looked like a keyboard, and Julie started to scream. The second he touched the thing, she was screaming. It wasn't like any scream I had ever heard before, not like the one from the first time we'd been here, and not in any horror movie. Certainly never in real life. It felt like my eardrums were bursting, and it only grew louder and more shrill. It was desperate. It was beyond torture, beyond pain, beyond anything a human could possibly endure. I imagined hell. I imagined that souls being dragged to damnation might sound something like that scream. I wasn't even religious. She squeezed my hand, and I felt my bones cracking. Chelsea. I rocketed out of my seat, trying to shake her, trying to ignore the searing pain. She wouldn't let go of my hand. Couldn't. Her eyes were wide open and dead, looking right at me but not seeing anything. Still, tears streamed from them, more tears than I'd ever seen anyone cry. I whipped back around. The doctor was typing urgently at his computer, and Kessler was staring, his hands out and his eyes moving rapidly back and forth like he was in shock. Jesus Christ, do something. I screamed, "Fucking do something." Chelsea was gasping now, a ragged sound that bounced around in my head. It felt like I could hear nothing but that horrible wet gasp, just dead air and her throat clawing for breath, drool seeping from her mouth and down her chin. Finally, I ripped the headband off her. Instantly, she went slack, letting go of my hand. The room was silent for a moment. Then Kessler muttered something to the other man, and the doctor rushed out the door. "Chelsea? Chelsea, baby, are you okay?" I kneeled in front of her, rubbing her knee. She wouldn't look at me, wouldn't move. For a second, I wondered if she was dead. "Please answer me." Right when I was about to check her pulse, her head turned. She wasn't screaming anymore, but her eyes were just as dead as they had been before when they met mine. They didn't even look like her eyes anymore. She opened her mouth, and out of it came a horrible whispery sound, like she'd forgotten how to use her tongue. I leaned in closer, trying to smile at her weakly. "What is it, honey?" "Please," she gasped. "No more." I felt hot. I felt like I had a horrible fever. I reached up, touched her wet face. "It's over, baby. No more. It's over." She stared at me, if you could call it that. She wasn't in her body anymore. This was something else. She twitched. "Just kill me." I turned back to look at Kessler. He looked just as shocked as I did, anxiously adjusting his tie. For a long moment we met eyes, and I knew what he was thinking. Something had gone horribly, unbelievably wrong here, and he didn't know how to fix it. The next few hours were a horrible blur. I remember doctors rushing around, wheeling Chelsea out of the room despite my pleas to know where they were going, to let me go with them. I sat alone in the cold, sterile room, her scream echoing around in my head. I cried. I begged the cameras in the corners of the room. I banged my head against the table. Someone came in and bandaged up my broken hand, but no one would tell me anything. It felt like days that I was in there. Honestly, it could have been. When the door finally opened again and Kessler stepped through it, I couldn't even feel relieved. I just felt broken. "Where is she?" I croaked, raising my head. "Is she okay?" He said nothing, just sat down in front of me. He was back to business. The horrified expression I'd last seen him have completely wiped away, although I could have sworn his face was a little pale. He took an envelope out of his pocket and placed it on the metal table between us. "Miss Sutherland is right outside. She's unharmed and feeling fine." I choked out a sob. I couldn't help it. I hid my face in my hands. Kessler cleared his throat and continued. "You are to take this envelope. Inside is a check for $700,000. One of our drivers is going to take you to the emergency room, where you will have your hand properly treated. Any further medical bills will be completely covered by us. You are to do this, and then go home and never return here. Do you understand?" I looked up at him, and I nodded. I was angry. I wanted to yell, demand answers, threaten to sue, but I was far too exhausted for any of that. I just wanted to see Chelsea. I just wanted to go home. Kessler nodded, his mouth pressed into a thin line. "We at OEM are terribly ashamed about what took place today. Please accept our deepest condolences." Something about that rubbed me the wrong way, made my skin prickle, but my mind was numb. I just nodded again, taking the envelope and shoving it into my pocket. Chelsea was just outside like he'd said, and she smiled when she saw me. I gathered her in my arms and squeezed, breathing in the center of her hair, kissing the side of her neck. "Thank God you're okay." Hey, don't cry." She pulled back, kissing my cheek and wiping away my tears. "I'm more than okay, baby." What a rush. A laugh burst out of me like an uncontrollable cough. "You're a psychopath. You like it." As promised, we were taken to the hospital, where I was put in a cast. My hand was broken in 3 different places. As Chelsea sat with me while they examined it, a horrible, anxious feeling crept over me. When I looked at her, all she did was smile. I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, white spots drifting across my vision, my hand throbbing dully on my chest. Chelsea's back pressed against the side of my arm was the only thing that made me feel any calmer. I turned to look at the back of her head, chewing on my lip. The room felt too quiet, too dark after spending so long in that bright, sterile room. I was restless. "Chelsea?" I whispered. "Are you awake?" She said nothing. She wasn't snoring, but I swore I could hear her heart beating. Ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk. I sighed. "What did you feel?" "When it was happening." I knew she wouldn't respond, but I asked anyways. I needed to talk, even if it was just to myself. "Ka-thunk, ka-thunk." I felt her shift a little, her back moving with each of her breaths. Her heartbeat began to speed up. Only then did I begin to wonder why I could hear it all, and so loud. I sat up a little, leaning on my elbows. I stroked her hair. "Hey, baby, are you okay?" No answer. Ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk. Suddenly I had that feeling. I had that feeling children get at night, when they become positive there's someone in the closet or just outside their bedroom door. Someone they don't know. Panic raced through me, and whether it was rational or not, I had to see her face. I had to be sure she was alive, and she was herself, and she was real. I reached over and took her arm, rolling her towards me. Chelsea's eyes were wide open, bloodshot, and my heart jumped into my throat when I realized it hadn't been her heartbeat that I had been hearing. It had been her gasping for air, her throat closing and opening again rapidly, swallowing and heaving dryly in the dark like an animal about to throw up. Ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk. I shook her awake, sitting straight up in the bed. She gasped, blinking at me almost sleepily, rubbing at her eyes. "Julian?" Her voice was raspy, tired and dry, but otherwise normal. I flicked on the bedside lamp, breathing hard. "Babe, what's wrong?" I shook my head. I couldn't look at her, couldn't breathe. I felt her wrap her arms around me, shushing me gently and stroking my hair. You were..." "Sure, it's okay. It's okay now, Jules, I'm okay. Just a bad dream." But it wasn't a dream. I knew it wasn't. After that, my girlfriend was different. She wasn't herself. I tried to go back to normal. She certainly tried to. She went to work like before, saw her friends, watched television with me on our couch. But it didn't feel like she was really there anymore. She didn't sleep much at all, and when she did, it was strange and restless. I more than once caught her sleeping with her eyes wide open, just like that first night. Once I asked her what her dreams had been like recently, and she hesitated, before telling me. You know how when meat is fresh, and the muscles are still alive, so they move and squirm even though the animal is dead? She smiled and ruffled my hair. That's what the backs of my eyelids look like. The worst part was how normal she pretended to be, how fine she told me she felt, how she kissed me like always, and how she tried to joke, but it never came out quite right. I reached my limit one night a month later when I got home after having a drink with some friends. The house was completely dark, completely silent, completely still. The second I opened the door, I felt it, the unexplainable terror. Like there was a man in the closet. It didn't feel right in there. Nothing felt like it was in the right place. Even though I knew it must have been. Everything just felt wrong. "Chelsea?" I called out quietly, shrugging off my jacket, wet from the rain. "Are you awake, honey?" No answer. I went to go upstairs when I saw her. She was down our hallway. Her head was half poking out around the corner, only her eyes showing in the darkness, wide open, staring at me, but not seeing me. She started to scream, and it was even worse to not be able to see her mouth. She screamed in short bursts, like a panting dog, the blood-curdling sounds jolting out of her. Fight or flight kicked in. I turned around and walked right back out the door, closing it behind me. I walked until I was across the street before looking back at the house. She was in our bedroom window. The lights turned on, illuminating her silhouette. I watched her rear back and slam her head into the glass once. Then again, something dark and liquid trickling down to the frame. The paramedics had to tie her down to keep her from thrashing or from hurting herself. I watched as they took her away, begging them to kill her. I tried to call OEM, but all I got was a message that the number had been disconnected. I drove back there while she was still in the hospital, but there was nothing left but an empty warehouse. When I picked her up, she was completely normal again, the only proof of the episode being the stitches on her forehead. It was that day, the day I picked her up, when I felt completely broken down and helpless, that I started to hear her voice. Honey, I looked over at my girlfriend, or what my girlfriend had become. She was staring out the window, smiling peacefully. What was that? She glanced at me, her smile widening. Nothing, Julian. I didn't say anything. I turned back to the road, convinced I was just losing my mind. I had to be. It would make sense. But then I heard it again. Julian, open your eyes. Honey, it's okay. Jesus Christ, Kessler. Would you take that thing off him? I think he's had enough. Story 2. My father left behind a strange confession. I don't know what to do now. Hello, Nosleep. This is the first time I'm writing this up. But I need your advice since you folks seem to have experience in such weird matters. Well, here goes. I should first state that I'm from Korea, but my name is irrelevant in this story. And in any case, I don't want anyone recognizing or gossiping about me and my father. My father was a financial investor, but due to some bad luck during the Asian financial crisis, he lost nearly all his money when I was young, not to mention being fired from the investment firm he worked for. He and my family moved into a room in my grandmother's old house in the country for a few years as a result. However, he managed to secure a job at a small accounting firm and sold 4 or 5 years later, leaving my grandmother's house. As far as I know, he never stepped foot in that house again for these last 23 years. Now, don't get me wrong. This was not due to any tension between him and my grandmother. In fact, he encouraged her to live with us in her last years, but to a strange aversion to his old hometown itself. This was the only point he wouldn't let himself be persuaded by my mother and grandmother. He wouldn't go back under any reason. I think he would try to sell my grandmother's old house if she didn't protest so strongly against it. By now, you're probably wondering why am I telling you all this, so let me get to the point. 3 months ago, I got a call from my mother that my father had disappeared. He had apparently called sick at work and was last seen boarding a train that was headed to his old village. But it was only last week that I received a call from a solicitor telling me that my father had given to him an envelope a few months ago to be opened on his death or unexplained absence for 3 months. In the envelope, I found his will and a letter addressed to me. I will write it down here word for word. My dear son, if you are reading this, it will probably mean that I am no longer in this world. If you receive this envelope upon my death, and if the causes seem to you quite natural, for example, dying from old age or of a common illness or from a car accident, that is, a death that may happen to anyone else, please throw this letter away without reading the content below, if only for the good times we had together. However, if I have disappeared with no clue as to my whereabouts, or if my death seems quite unnatural, continue reading on. You may remember we lived in your late grandmother's house during your youth, when I was nearing bankrupt. During the few years we lived there, I was often visited by old friends of mine. Most offered to console me in my time of trouble. But there were a few who weren't so considerate. One of them was Kim, retracted. You may remember him, as he often gave you large amounts of pocket money while telling you to call him uncle. The real reason he was so generous to you was to spite me. Since he was often jealous, I managed to go to college and get a good job while he was stuck on his parents' farm. He often hinted, gloatingly, that I ended up being more miserable than he had, and that his kids would never see their father broke, living in a borrowed room in their grandmother's house. However, it was one night that I finally saw red. Kim was rather drunk that night, and he told me, mockingly, that you would be better off having him as a father than a loser like I was, actually telling me that he was considering adopting you to unburden a poor friend. I literally kicked him out of the house, but I was determined he would pay for that taunt. Now, I knew one thing about Kim. He was extremely partial to good wine. I therefore, after necessary preparations, invited him for dinner a few days later, saying I wanted to apologize for the way I was rough with him the other night, and to make up for it, to give him a present of an old bottle of raspberry wine, his favorite. You may remember that your grandmother's old house had an underground cellar I dug myself. I told him the wine was in there, and we went down together. Once in the cellar, I gave him a bottle, telling him to examine the wine, and while he was absorbed, knocked him out with a blow to the head using a spade. I was determined no one would find out where he was. So, binding his body up with ropes, I carried him over to a corner and proceeded to wall him up using bricks. I was sure this wouldn't be noticed, as the cellar wall was also in bricks and was rather irregular, but as I was nearly finished, Kim regained consciousness. Astonished, he managed to groggily ask, "Lee, what are you doing?" I laughed at him, telling him that since he thought I deserved no children since I was a poor loser, I thought his children deserved no father in reverse, and that no one would know what became of him. This was quite true, as the village was a small country town with no CCTV, and that, drunk as he usually was, everyone would assume he took a wrong step and fell in the river. I finished up the wall and left, his muffled cries ringing in my ears. As you know, my son, more than 20 years have passed since then, but recently, I've been starting to hear things. I hear Kim's voice, pleading with me to free him, or threatening that I would pay for what I did. It was enough to keep me from my sleep, but the other night, I saw Kim at the foot of my bed, laughing at me, telling me it was my turn now. I thought it was a dream, but I found a mound of dirt, the same dirt from the cellar floor. In the morning, please, my dear son, if I have disappeared or died mysteriously, bury the entrance to that cellar and tear down the old house to the ground in my place. When I finished reading this, I naturally thought my father had gone mad and would have ignored the letter, but on the advice of my father's solicitor, I decided it would be safe to recover the body of my father's friend, if there was one, and to give it proper burial, then tear down the house, as my father asked me to. So, 2 weeks earlier, I went down to my grandmother's old house and hired a team of workers to remove the bricks from the wall of the cellar. But, and this is why I am writing this here, I and the workers saw something utterly inexplicable. We did indeed find a body walled up, tied up with old ropes, as my father said, and curiously well preserved, as if it had died yesterday. However, the body was not that of a stranger. It was that of my father, not as I saw him last, but just as I remembered him in my youth when he was 40, exactly when he had walled up his friend. In case you're wondering, yes, the walls were untouched when we arrived for at least 20 years. And yes, the body was that of my disappeared father, just younger. What did I do with that discovery, you wonder? Nothing, actually. I just removed the body and asked the workers to seal up the cellar entrance with cement and tear down the house, paying them well to keep all this a secret. And I would have let this pass as a weird incident. But since I uncovered the body in that old cellar wall, I've been having strange dreams as well. I see my father mostly, begging me to help him get out. I hear his voice after dark, when I'm alone in my house, praying me to help him. But I also have other dreams as well. I sometimes see a stranger laughing at me. He mocks me, saying I shouldn't have torn down that wall. And when I see him in my dreams, I wake up to find a mound of dirt beside my bed. I don't know what to do now. Should I go back to where that house was? Story 3. I found out the day of my death on a website. I can't tell this story to anyone, but I need to get it off my chest. So I will write it here. Names have been changed. It all started in 1996. My parents had just bought our first home computer, one of those bulky machines that sat in the living room for the whole family to use. On the rare occasions when my parents weren't around, I would turn it on and scour the internet for things little children aren't supposed to mess with. One afternoon, my dad was at work and my mom ran to the shop, leaving me home alone for just a few minutes. I typed www. Death, calm into the search bar. I often made up creepy website names. I was a curious child, and I wanted to educate myself on the things adults were afraid to talk about. The website that popped up was a gloomy page featuring the drawing of a skeleton in a black cape. It read, "Do you want to know when you will die?" It prompted me to enter my name and date of birth. I did, then clicked on submit. As soon as a new window opened, I instinctively closed my eyes. Did I really want to know when I would die? No, I didn't. Did I believe that a scary website could actually know the date of my death? No, I didn't. But you never know. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard Mom's keys turning in the lock. Mom would be furious if she knew what I was up to. She thought I only dealt in stuffed animals and Disney princesses. I grabbed the mouse and darted toward the little X in the top right corner of the window. In the process, I stole a quick, furtive glance. A tiny glance. But I saw it all right. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. In the years that followed, I lived my life without ever thinking about that stupid website again. Did I though? August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. That date was burned into the back of my mind. It sat there like a relentless ticking clock I never dared to speak of. It only left me with 26 years, which doesn't sound too bad, but it really isn't that much when you think about it. Although I would never allow myself to acknowledge it, I rushed to achieve my goals because I secretly feared time was running out. I wrote like crazy throughout my 20s until I managed to publish a novel. It sold decently well. Seeing my creation on library shelves helped some of the anxiety subside. At least I had made my mark in the world. A small mark. I needed to keep going to make it bigger. I wrote another novel that I was convinced would become my masterpiece. It was rejected by every single editor. I had never felt so hopelessly crushed. One night, in the midst of a panic attack, I opened my laptop and went back to that website. I landed on a gray, empty page. All it said was, "This domain name is for sale." Relief rushed through me. This whole death prediction thing was a hoax from the early days of the internet, meant to attract traffic from credulous children like me. Obviously, afterwards, I developed a more relaxed disposition, but only to an extent. I still had a lot of work to do on my way to greatness, and I'd better not procrastinate. I married Tim on a bright summer day. From the moment I met him, I knew he was the one. Sweet, dependable, down to earth. As a tax accountant, he had a comfortable paycheck, great benefits, and a solid life insurance policy. Sure, he wasn't the most adventurous man in the world, but who cared? He believed in me and was happy to support me while I poured my time into my literary endeavors. August 20th, 2022 came around. You may ignore the passing of time all you want. Tell yourself that a certain day is still far off, but that day will come. Oh, yes, it will. I pretended that there was nothing special about August 20th, 2022. Still, I took some precautions. In the weeks prior, I put myself through a battery of medical checkups. Not that I had any symptoms. Indeed, the doctors confirmed that I was healthy as a horse. Even though August 20th was a Saturday night, I made no plans. I sat in front of the television and did not budge. Tim went upstairs at 10 p.m. He always went to bed early. I wished I could join him, but for some reason I absolutely had to finish binge watching some meaningless Netflix show. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. What if I die in my sleep? At 11:31 p.m., I started feeling a tingling in my nails. I wiggled my fingers. It went away. A few minutes later, it came back. As any sane person would do, I pulled out my iPhone and Googled it. None of the medical conditions associated with nail tingling could possibly apply to me. As I had already established beyond a reasonable doubt, there was nothing wrong with my body. The only condition that did match was anxiety disorder. It was 11:40 p.m. on August 20th, 2022, and I had to face it. I was really anxious to go on that website again. My fingers flew across the touch keyboard, hoping to land on "This domain name is for sale." I crashed back into that old webpage from 1996. But this time, the Cape Skeleton was pointing at a real-time clock. 11:44, 1 p.m. 11:44, 2 p.m. 11:44, 3 p.m. The room started spinning. The ground gave way beneath my feet. What kind of sick joke was this? That website was supposed to be down. How did it recognize me from 26 years ago? I didn't use the same Google account. Google accounts didn't even exist in 1996. Wait, I wasn't being rational. What the screen was showing me was just a real-time clock. There was no actual piece of information tied to me. Most likely, The original creators of the website had bought back the domain name and decided to play a prank on anyone who had been on it back in the day. Sooner or later, someone would go on the website at an unfortunate time and get scared out of their mind. Why won't this tingling stop? I tossed my phone on the couch and went back to watching TV. I refused to be intimidated by such nonsense, but I could not understand anything the characters on the screen were saying. I glanced at my nails. They looked a bit dark. Had they always looked this way? Almost without thinking, my hand grabbed the phone again. I checked the timer. 11:48, 5 p.m. So what? I told myself, this is a night like any other night. It will pass and the sun will rise and the darkness will be forgotten. DRI then. I shot up from the couch. What was that? The doorbell. Just the doorbell. Our house was pretty isolated, but every now and then, bored teenagers would bike out to the edge of town and ring random doorbells for kicks. I looked through the peephole. Just a dark, empty street. I unlocked the door. Maybe I could catch them, give them a good scolding. As I pushed the door open, a gust of icy wind slithered inside, engulfing me in cold, lonely despair. I slammed the door shut and backed away into the warmth of my home. Dry Yithin. Again. Go away, I shouted. I strained to hear anything outside. Nothing. No giggling. No footsteps. No bike wheels turning. Just dead silence. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. I looked through the peephole. I screamed, but the scream didn't come out. It turned inward, digging into my lungs. As I stood there breathless, my mouth agape like the corpse of a hanging man. Outside my door was a skeleton in a black cape, its unnatural grin and hollow eyes boring into me through the peephole. I scrambled back to the couch, snatched up my phone, dialed 911, and started jabbering. Help! Someone at my door, trying to get in. Help! They want to hurt me. Then I realized that the call hadn't gone through. I had no reception. 0 bars. In fact, the reception symbol was gone altogether. Suddenly, the phone fell from my hands. I had finally noticed it. My nails. Black. Broken. Rotten. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. It was real. It had always been real. I lunged at my phone. Thankfully, it was still intact. I opened a browser and went back to the website. 11:54, 58 p.m. Dry in. My heart jumped into my throat. It tasted like blood. 11 minutes to go. I took a deep, trembling breath. I was a smart woman. There had to be something I could do to save myself. Every problem has a solution, doesn't it? I brought my phone closer to my face, scanning every inch of the web page, looking for a clue, a loophole, some guidance from the devil himself. There it was, at the very bottom of the page, almost invisible, contact. I slammed my thumb down. A chat window popped up. Sleepy friend. Hi, Suzanne. It knew my name. At this point, I wasn't even surprised. Sleepy friend. Congratulations on your upcoming death. How can we help today? Me, I don't want to die. Sleepy friend. How can we help today? Me, I don't want to die. Please make it go away. Sleepy friend is typing. My eyes snapped at the timer. 11:58, 31 p.m. Come on. I had no time to waste. Sleepy friend, we understand that you requested a personal death prediction on October 13th, 1996. We are proud to say our predictions are 100% accurate. Me, I don't care. I don't want Toady. Sleepy friend, we understand that you requested a personal death prediction on June 13th, 1996. Me, IT was a mistake. Sleepy friend is typing. 12 o'clock, 0 a.m. 12 o'clock, 1 a.m. 12 o'clock, 2 a.m. My limbs were curling up, tightening into a sort of rigor mortis. Sleepy friend, I see. Don't worry, Suzanne, all mortals make mistakes. We proudly implement a near unlimited satisfaction guarantee. My body relaxed a little bit. Maybe there was a way out of this nightmare. Me. So I'm not going to die? Isn't Mr. Goig away? Sleepy friend is typing. 12:02, 10 a.m. Me, am I safe or not? Sleepy friend. However, since our operator has already reached your address and the scheduled pickup is less than 3 minutes away, it is against company policy to send him back without a retrieval. Me, what does that mean? You said satisfaction guarantee. 12:03, 2 a.m. Sleepy friend. We are happy to accommodate our customers in any way we can. You are welcome to enter the personal information of an alternative subject. First name, last name, date of birth. Me, what do you mean? Sleepy friend. Our operator has already reached your address. It is against company policy to send him back without a retrieval. You are welcome to enter the personal information of an alternative subject. First name, last name, date of birth. I tried to swallow, but my saliva had thickened into gravel. He was content with his life. He had lived a good life. Would growing old and sick make him any happier? Probably not. Sure, he was a competent tax accountant. There were thousands others like him. Did the world need more tax filing from him specifically? Not really. 12:04, 23 a.m. I, on the other hand, had important work to do. I was creative. I was unique. My new novel was coming along nicely. It just needed time to mature. Time, 12:04, 51 a.m. I brutally silenced my thoughts. Like a machine, I typed hard and fast. Tim's first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, 12:05, 0 a.m. I held my breath, eyes fixed on the front door, waiting for the horror to come through. Ding. I jumped. It wasn't the doorbell, just a notification. Sleepy friend had responded. Sleepy friend. Thank you, Suzanne. The team wishes you a long and happy life. Sleepy friend has exited the chat. That was it. The timer ticked on peacefully. 12:05, 59 a.m. 12:06, 0 a.m. 12:06, 1 a.m. And I was still alive. I looked down at my nails. To my immense relief, they looked perfectly normal. The thought occurred to me that perhaps they had always looked normal. Maybe the fear, bottled up for 26 years, had made me hallucinate. With newly found courage, I walked the front door and peered to the peephole. Only the empty street. For the first time that night, I suddenly felt clear-minded. It was like I had just woken from a bad dream into an ordinary, reassuring reality. It had all been an elaborate prank, and a very tasteless one at that. I didn't know how they pulled it off, but after a good night's sleep, I would figure it out. Swoosh. As I turned around, the hairs at the back of my neck stood up. The cape figure was gliding down the stairs behind me. Its bony grin flashed in the dim light. My legs were 2 pillars of stone. I stood still as the figure breezed right past me. The front door swung open in its wake. The figure blended into the night. In the blink of an eye, the door was closed again. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. I did not bother checking the bedroom. I knew what I would find. I'd buried my husband Tim 3 years ago. He died of a heart attack. Surprising for a man in his 30s, but not so surprising considering both his father and uncle suffered from heart problems. He is sorely missed. As the wonderful provider that he was, he left me with enough money to support myself while I write full-time. I still haven't finished my masterpiece. I am so damn close, but something always holds me back. Some days, I can't focus on my manuscript for more than a few seconds at a time. I keep thinking that I might be about to die and the panic makes my brain go haywire. Other days, I simply stare at the wall, drenched in the weight of this never-ending existence. I think the uncertainty is killing me. Maybe if I knew what to expect, maybe then I would feel motivated again. I did check the website. It looks exactly as it did in 1996. Do you want to know when you will die? First name, last name, date of birth, enter. Should I do it? Story 4. I had sleep paralysis, but now she haunts me outside of sleep. That night provided no distinction between itself and 100 others, and yet, to this very hour, It is the one that bewilders me the most. My earliest recollection of this night, already stained by the visions we call nightmares. And it has since occurred to me that these very visions were the root of what others, with a kind of pity, call my fascination a horror. They insist, of course, that the indulgence in the dreadful had given rise to the dreams, but the truth, I think, is quite the reverse. As long before I had encountered a tale of horror, my nights were filled with them, vivid and entire, such that I touched, felt and suffered through them, as though they were the very texture of reality. What later passed for horror in plays and books was, to me, the language to articulate which I had already known. The dreams and their ceaseless recurrence held less the quality of terror, but more so desolation. For although fear was its shadow, it seemed loneliness, untamed, oppressing, intense, was its true substance. That particular vision, as I recall, arrived with the same melancholy in which the night itself had shrouded me in, and it was under that veil that I first became aware of a voice. It was a man's voice, deliberate, articulate. He seemed to say less than he knew, and as he threaded through my mind, my vision fractured into two planes of perspective, the dim, humid air of the dream, and flickering against it, a vision, like from a scene from an uncanny chronicle. There was a mother, a solitary mother, and a child, a little girl radiant with all the charm of innocence. The voice endowed their figures with a tenderness so complete that I might have mistaken it for love itself. The child, obedient, mirthful, inquisitive, and the mother, exalted in that devotion that which the little one had become, beyond dispute, the absolute center of her world. The dream drew on, the voice continued, with brevity, calculation, and darkness such that I dare not name, and with it my unease grew cold, precise, insistent. I recalled the little girl, her cheer, her inquisitions, the charm that drew me in despite myself, her mother, all pride and delight in the radiant company of her child, their tender exchanges unfolding as though staged for me alone. Yet beneath it all, a tension grew, thick, dreadful, unspoken. I remember the moment the child's light faltered, her sweetness slipping away as suddenly as a candle snuffed. That charm that had secured my affection was gone, and with it a silence fell. The mother, steadfast and loving, showed no notice of change. The voice observed this, too, with cold insistence. And then, most dreadfully, I saw her, the mother herself. What had once been beauty, poise, the unmistakable grace of a woman well kept, collapsed before me into something hollow, unwell. She had become, in an instant, the shell of her former self. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and my disquiet thickened into a terror I could neither name nor escape. The mother's mind was, by then, most certainly gone. I saw in the restless way she moved about her child, in her speech and gestures that carried no sense, only fragments. Yet what I beheld was never wholly clear to me, never certain. It was like watching a puzzle with pieces missing, though the pieces lay scattered before my very eyes, hidden only by some refusal of sight. She believed her daughter looked like this. The little girl appeared again, familiar, radiant, almost celestial, like one of Raphael's own angels. But she really looked like this. And with those words, the glow collapsed into shadow, into a depth without end, darkness, abyssal and all-consuming. I awoke in a dark room. The love of my life lay peacefully beside me, her breathing steady, untroubled. Yet the air around me was not my own. I felt a presence in that darkness, as though I had risen into company I had never invited. My eyes fought their way back to focus, dragging open at a snail's pace. The blackness thickened into a fog, swallowing the corners, softening the shapes, leaving me helpless to search it fully. My body, too, betrayed me. Still as stone, it would not obey the simplest command. I lay there, bound to the bed, listening to her quiet sleep while something else unseen, unspoken, lingered close in the dark. I recalled the border of my vision. The black veil of darkness slowly was undone, and hidden beneath lay a small figure, stiff like a mannequin. The black fog dissipated more and more, and revealed more of my unwelcome guest. Even as I recount the events, I can't help but feel unsteady, for what she really looked like was truly horrid. I remember her skin which rippled and moved, as though alive, her eyes vacant, but even so, felt horribly watchful and perceptive. The events of that night had gone on for longer than one night, and my interaction with this unwelcome guest stirred something truly more haunting than any of the so-called horrors. It stirred an unhealthy connection to a girl that had known nothing but love and devotion in life, and now sought it in even after. I was staring out my window, beyond the trees and the night's darkness that shrouded them. I saw her once more, and with vacant eyes, she had seen me as well. Story 5. I don't know how to stop him. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. I feel so exhausted. I can't think straight anymore. I'm an international student. I won't say my name or what country, because I already feel unsafe, but my family is thousands of miles away, and I don't have close friends, especially now. Most of my days are just classes, library, and then back to my room. Back in March this year, I matched with a guy on a dating app. He seemed very nice at first, slightly pushy, but funny. I was so lonely here. I just wanted to talk to someone badly. After a week or so, I gave him my Instagram. That was my mistake. At the start, it was all casual. He was liking my photos, always telling me how smart I was and what a pretty girl I am. It flattered me a lot, especially because it's been so difficult to befriend anyone here. I've always had this alien feeling in this country. He was sending memes and random stuff, the kind of stuff normal people do when they're chatting, I think. Then he started asking to meet and was really pressing on it. But it was right when I was preparing for my midterms. So I told him I was busy and maybe we could plan a date later. But he kept pushing. He started calling me through Instagram, sending when I didn't reply. Then he started sending a bunch of nudes. I told him to stop, that he was acting like a weirdo. He wrote back, "Don't piss me off, bitch." I blocked him immediately. The next day, I got messages from a new account. Same pictures, same tone. I blocked that one too. Then another popped up, and another. It was endless. I'd block one, and within minutes another would text me. Then he started reposting my own photos on these accounts with captions like, "College who," and "an easy bit." Some of my classmates even saw it, because he was tagging them all over. I was going crazy. And then was the moment when I truly panicked. I kept receiving photos of myself at the bus stop, literally that same day. Then another of me in the college library. I understood it wasn't just some game anymore. I was panicking so much. So I went straight to the police for the first time. The officer was patient about all of it, which honestly irritated me the most. He looked through my screenshots, the account usernames, the dating app chat. He explained that it was stalking and harassment, and said he'd log it. He told me to keep documenting everything, and even suggested applying for a protection order. The issue was, they couldn't identify him. Throwaway accounts, app numbers, no name, no address. Even the photos from the dating app looked like they were just pulled from the internet. I felt so stupid in that moment, almost crying while he spoke. Without something concrete, there was nothing they could serve. He told me to call if I ever felt unsafe in the moment, and they'd send someone. I left with a case number, and it felt like a piece of paper against a hurricane. For weeks, I kept saving everything. All the accounts, all the numbers, call logs, screenshots, but the messages kept coming. Somehow, he got my new number. Texts like, "cute jacket," right after I leave class. Calls at night from different numbers. If I answered, it was just breathing. Once, a whisper my name. I went back to the police again. This time I was screaming and crying, because for weeks I'd just been slipping further into madness. They updated the report, told me they'd escalated to cybercrime or something. They said they'd request patrols near my dorm. It didn't help me sleep. By May I was failing classes. I couldn't focus. Every buzz on my phone made me nauseous. I stopped talking to people. I didn't want to tell my parents because I knew they'd tell me to come back home, and this was my dream school. I just couldn't mess it all up like this. I felt completely alone, but at the same time so constantly watched. By June, I broke. I moved out of the dorm into a small single flat further away. I told housing it was for safety reasons, and they expedited it. I trashed my phone, and bought a second-hand one off some marketplace. New SIM, new number. I deleted every account, stopped using social media whatsoever, changed my routes to campus, wore different clothes, kept my head down under my hood. And for these months, it actually worked. There was silence, no calls, no texts, no new accounts. I thought maybe I'd finally gotten free. 2 nights ago, that ended. I woke up to buzzing around 1 a.m. My new phone was lying on the nightstand, screen lit, already open to the gallery. There were hundreds of photos, all of me, not selfies, not screenshots, real photos. Me at the bus stop with my headphones in, me getting groceries, me sitting in the laundromat reading, different clothes, different days, some from just weeks ago. Every single one taken from outside, from a corner, a doorway, or through a window. No selfies, no inside shots, just me, going about my life as if someone had been following me every single day with a camera. I stared until my eyes blurred with tears. My chest felt hollow. I don't remember deciding to move, but suddenly I was already on my feet, throwing the phone against the wall. The screen got all cracked. I shoved it into a trash bag and carried it all the way to a dumpster down the road. I was shaking so hard I thought my knees would give out. The next morning, I went straight to the police again. I told the officer everything about the hidden folder, the photos, how I'd thrown the phone away. He asked for the device, and I told him I panicked and got rid of it. I thought he'd be angry, but he just sighed and said that made it harder to analyze. He still took the full report, wrote everything down, said he'd escalate it to the cyber unit and request additional CCTV checks. He asked about my new flat, wrote down the building name, my unit number, asked about my schedule, when I usually left for campus, when I came back, and so on, so the patrol could time their checks. He was so calm about all of it. Even told me not to feel bad about breaking the phone. That panic was normal. When I was leaving, he asked if housing had given me spare keys. I said yes, one set. He said if I wanted patrols to do checks while I was in classes, I could drop the spare off at the station. So I did. I walked out feeling slightly lighter, like maybe I wasn't completely alone anymore. This night, I locked my door, checked the windows twice, and left the lights on, just to feel safer. I dragged a chair and wedged it under the handle. I couldn't sleep. My body was humming with adrenaline. But sometime past midnight, exhaustion finally pulled me under. Then I woke to a sound, buzzing, on my nightstand. The same phone, cracked screen, open to the gallery, same folder. At the bottom, a new photo, me, asleep, taken from the corner of my bedroom. I dropped it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I checked the locks again. Perfect. Checked the windows. Latch. And then my stomach dropped. The chair wasn't at the door anymore. It was back by the table. Exactly where it had been before I moved it. So either I dreamed moving it or someone put it back. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I'm losing my mind. It was only outside photos before. Now it's inside. My room. I called the police. I couldn't think of anything else. But as soon as I hung up, the thought hit me. The only people who know where I live are housing and the officer, and he has my spare keys. The phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I know it's there. Then the knocking started. Slow, heavy, a voice on the other side. It's just the police. Open up. I don't know if I should open the door. Story 6. The whole town goes outside during full moons, and what they're staring at isn't natural. My girlfriend Jordan and I moved to Roxborough Hollow 3 months ago. We thought we'd found paradise. A tiny town nestled in the Appalachian foothills, population 914, where you could rent a 2-bedroom house for what we'd been paying for a studio apartment back in Kansas City. More importantly, it was far enough from our families that they couldn't interfere with our plans to get married without the circus they all wanted. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Wood, had shown us around town with obvious pride. Main Street stretched for exactly 4 blocks, lined with the kinds of shops you'd expect. Jacob's General Store, Mariah's Diner, a small post office, an old-fashioned barber shop with a spinning pole. Everyone we met seemed genuinely friendly. The kind of place where neighbors actually knew each other's names. "You'll love it here," Mrs. Wood had said as we signed the lease. Roxborough Hollow is very traditional. People here value their routines. We settled in quickly. I found work at the county's road maintenance department, and Jordan got a part-time job at the library. The pace of life was exactly what we hoped for: slow, peaceful, predictable. For the first month, everything was perfect. Then came our first full moon. I should mention that our house sits on a small hill at the edge of town, with a clear view of Main Street and most of the residential area. Jordan loves to sit on our back porch in the evenings, and I'd gotten into the habit of joining her with a beer after work. The night sky was flawlessly clear at least once a month. It was during one of these quiet moments that we first witnessed what the locals simply called a watching. It started around 9 p.m. Jordan noticed at first. She'd been mid-sentence, telling me about some new books that had arrived at the library, when she suddenly stopped talking. "Tony," she whispered, grabbing my arm. "Look." Down in the town, people were emerging from their houses, but they weren't walking normally. They moved with an odd mechanical precision, their arms hanging straight at their sides, their heads tilted back at angles that made my neck hurt just looking at them. Men, women, children, entire families filing out of their homes and gathering in the streets, their faces turned skyward. "What are they doing?" Jordan asked. I didn't have an answer. From our vantage point, we could see at least 50 people spread throughout the town, all standing perfectly still, all staring up at the stars. Their necks were craned back so far that it looked painful, unnatural. Some of the angles were so severe that I wonder how they could even breathe. "Should we go check on them?" Jordan asked, but something in her voice told me she really didn't want to. Neither did I. There was something deeply wrong about the scene below us. The way they stood, motionless as scarecrows, their faces pale in the moonlight. Even from a distance, I could see that their eyes were open unnaturally wide, like they were trying to take in as much of the sky as possible. We watched for nearly 3 hours. None of them moved except for the occasional slight adjustment of their head position, tracking something across the heavens that we couldn't see. No one spoke. No one even seemed to blink. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. Around midnight, they all turned and walked back to their houses, as naturally as possible, disappearing inside. Within minutes, the town looked completely normal again. Jordan and I sat in stunned silence for a long time after that. "Did that really just happen?" she finally asked. The next morning, we debated whether to ask anyone about it. At Mariah's Diner, our usual breakfast spot, everything seemed perfectly normal. Mariah greeted us with her usual smile. The coffee was hot, and the other customers chatted about mundane things. The weather, the upcoming church barbecue, someone's new partner. Finally, I worked up the courage to bring it up. "We noticed something interesting last night," I said to Mariah as she refilled our coffee. "Looked like the whole town was out stargazing." Mariah's smile brightened considerably. "Oh, you saw him too. Wonderful. Not everyone can see him clearly on their first viewing." "Him?" Jordan asked. "The gazer," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He appears on a full moon, right there on its surface. Such a blessing to witness." I exchanged a glance with Jordan, our brains both saying, "What the hell?" We didn't really see anyone, just people looking up. "Give it time," Mariah said warmly. "Some folks need a few months before they can make him out properly. He's quite large, you know. Takes up most of the moon's face, even." We got similar responses everywhere we asked. At the general store, Mr. Patter described the giant as having kind eyes, though he admitted you had to look very carefully to see the features forming in the lunar craters. The librarian, Mrs. Chan, told Jordan that the gazer had been appearing to their community for generations, watching over them with paternal care. It was like the entire town had agreed on this vague, dismissive explanation and refused to elaborate. The next month, we were ready for it. We'd marked the calendar, noting that it had happened exactly on the night of the full moon. This time, we watched from the beginning. At 9:03 p.m., the first person emerged, old botanist Mr. Garrett from down the street, then Mrs. Buckley with her twin boys, then the Gibsons, the Kings, the family whose name we still didn't know from the Blue House on Greenview Street. One by one, they came outside and took their positions. But this time, we could see more details, and what we saw made my blood run cold. Their eyes weren't just wide open. They were open so far that I could see white all around the iris, like their eyelids had been pinned back. Their mouths hung slightly open, and I swear I could see drool glistening on some of their chins. The children's necks were bent at angles that would have been agonizing if they'd been conscious. Their small heads tilted so far back that their faces were nearly parallel to the ground. "Tony," Jordan whispered, her voice shaking. "Look at their fingers." I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. Their hands weren't just hanging at their sides. Their fingers were spread wide, stretched so far apart that the skin between them looked painful and white. Some of them had their fingers bent backward at the joints, creating shapes that human hands weren't meant to make. I forced myself to look up at the moon, trying to see what they were all staring at so intently. At first, it just looked like a normal full moon to me, bright, round, crater-marked. But the longer I stared, the more I began to notice patterns in the shadows. The dark patches seemed to be moving, shifting and rearranging themselves. What I'd initially dismissed as random crater formations began to look almost deliberate, like features trying to form. The longer I looked, the more convinced I became that there was something pulsing and tunneling just below the moon's surface. "Do you see it?" Jordan asked, her voice strange and distant. I did see it, or thought I did. A massive face taking shape in the moon's geography, with deep craters for eyes and what looked like mountain ranges forming the suggestion of a mouth. The face seemed impossibly large, as if something the size of a continent was pressing itself against the back of the moon, leaving impressions in the rock. "We need to call someone," I said, tearing my gaze away. "Who? The police? What would we tell them? That our neighbors like to look at stars in uncomfortable positions?" We watched for 4 hours that night. The face in the moon seemed to become clearer as time passed, more defined, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was looking back at us, looking back at all of us. The third month, I made a decision that I now regret. I decided to get closer, against Jordan's protest. I crept down a hill and hid behind the woods garden shed, about 20 feet from where Mrs. Wood herself stood with her husband and teenage daughter. From this distance, I could hear them. They were humming. It wasn't a melody, exactly, but more like a constant, low vibration that seemed to come from deep in their throats. The sound made my teeth hurt and sent shivers down my spine. But worse than the humming was the smell. They reeked of ozone. The odor was so strong it made my eyes water, and I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from gagging. I watched Mrs. Wood's face from the side. Her eyes had rolled back so far that only the whites were visible, and the veins in her neck stood out like thick ropes. Her daughter, who couldn't have been more than 16, was making small clicking sounds with her tongue in rhythm with the humming. That's when I noticed the footprints. In the soft dirt of the wood's flower bed, I could see dozens of footprints from previous months. But they were wrong. They were too deep, pressed into the earth as if the people making them weighed far more than they should. I looked up at Mrs. Wood again, and this time I focused on her bare feet. Her toes were extended, clawing at the ground, and they seemed to be bulging and getting longer as I watched. Then I made the mistake of looking up at the moon. The face was clearer now, more defined than it had been from our distant porch. I could see what looked like enormous eyes formed by the Sea of Tranquility and the Sea of Serenity, with the lunar highlands creating the impression of a broad forehead. The dark patches that formed the mouth seemed to be moving, opening and closing in rhythm with the townspeople's humming. Movement. But worse than that, I was convinced it was looking directly at me. Those vast crater eyes seemed to focus on my hiding spot behind the shed, and I felt a pressure in my skull, like something massive and alien trying to push its way into my thoughts. The face in the moon tilted slightly, and I swear I could see what looked like a smile forming in the arrangement of shadows and ridges. A knowing, predatory smile that seemed to say, "I see you there, little watcher. Soon you'll join them." I'd seen enough. I crept back up the hill, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the whole town could hear it. Then I'd really be screwed for interrupting their fucked up ritual. We're leaving, I told Jordan as soon as I got back to porch. We're packing tonight, and we're gone by morning. But Jordan was staring down at the town with a strange expression on her face. Tony, she said softly, do you hear that? I stopped and listened. The humming was audible even from our house now, a low, thrumming vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. But there was something else, a higher pitch, almost musical, weaving in and out of the deeper sound. It's beautiful, Jordan whispered. I grabbed her shoulders and turned her to face me. Her pupils were dilated, and she was swaying slightly on her feet. Jordan, we need to go inside. Now. She blinked slowly, and for a moment, her eyes focused on mine. Yes, she said. Yes, you're right. We went inside and I closed all the curtains, turned on the TV loud enough to drown out the humming. Jordan seemed to snap out of whatever trance had been affecting her, but the experience left us both shaken. We tried to leave the next morning. I loaded our belongings into the car, while Jordan handled the last-minute details, like canceling our utilities and dropping off the house key. But when I went to start the engine, nothing happened. The car was completely dead. Mr. Jacobs from the general store happened to be walking by. Car trouble? He asked cheerfully. Won't start, I said. The engine won't even turn over. Oh, that happens sometimes around here. Something about the elevation, or maybe the mineral content in the ground. Plays havoc with electronics. I'll call Matt's garage for you. Matt couldn't get to us until the following week. His explanation was identical to Mr. Jacobs. Something about the local environment affecting car batteries and electrical systems. He'd need to order parts. We're still waiting for those parts. It's been 2 weeks since our failed escape attempt, and I'm writing this during the day because I know what's coming tonight. It's almost time for the full moon again, and I can already feel something changing in the air. The humming starts earlier each month, so faint during the day that you might mistake it for tinnitus or distant machinery. Jordan hears it too, but she doesn't seem bothered by it anymore. Yesterday, I caught her standing on our back porch, her head tilted slightly upward, her eyes closed and a peaceful expression on her face. Just listening to the music, she said when I asked what she was doing, and waiting for him to show himself again. Mariah says he's been especially clear lately. I don't hear any music. I only hear that terrible humming, growing louder as the sun sets. And I refuse to look at the moon anymore, not after seeing that malevolent intelligence staring back at me from its surface. Tonight is the 4th full moon since we arrived in Roxborough Hollow. I've barricaded myself in our bedroom with the radio turned up loud and towels stuffed under the door. Jordan is somewhere else in the house. She said she wanted to get some fresh air about an hour ago. I can hear footsteps on our front porch now, slow and deliberate. The humming is so loud it's making the windows vibrate. And underneath it all, I can hear Jordan's voice calling my name. But it doesn't sound like Jordan anymore. Her voice is too deep, too resonant, like it's coming from somewhere much larger than her throat. Tony, she calls, come outside. You need to see this. You need to see what's up there. The footsteps are moving around the house now. I can track them as they circle from the front porch to the side yard, then around to the back, but there are too many of them. It sounds like a dozen people walking around our house, all in perfect synchronization. Tony, the stars are so beautiful tonight. Don't you want to see the stars? That's not Jordan's voice. I don't know whose voice it is, but it's coming from right outside my window. The humming is getting louder. I can feel it in my bones now, vibrating to the floor and up into my chest. The radio isn't helping anymore. The sound seems to be coming from inside my own head. I think I understand now why no one in town wants to talk about the watching. It's not because they're embarrassed or secretive. It's because they don't remember it happening. Whatever takes them over during those nights, it leaves them afterward. And they go back to their normal lives with nothing but vague impressions and an agreed-upon story to tell curious newcomers. But I remember everything I've seen, and I know that whatever's out there in the sky, whatever comes to them every month, it's not going to let me leave Roxborough Hollow. Not now that I know. The footsteps have stopped. The The humming is so loud now that I can't think straight. And Jordan, or the thing that sounds like Jordan, has stopped calling my name. I can hear the front door opening. If anyone finds this, don't come looking for us. Don't come to Roxborough Hollow. And whatever you do, don't look up at the stars when the moon is full. Some things are better left unwatched. Story 7. I thought I was being paranoid about knocking on my door, but the truth was much worse. Hi. Something really strange happened to me a week ago, and I need to talk about it. Context. I live in the apartment where I grew up. My parents moved out, and now I live here with my boyfriend. He's a bartender and comes home late at night. The building has 4 floors, but there's also a 5th floor with small rooms for social housing / reintegration. So there are lots of comings and goings and new faces. One morning, I ran into a new neighbor from the 5th floor while getting the mail. I just said hello. A few days later, at night, I started hearing light knocks on my door. Same time, every evening. I was scared but thought I was being paranoid. Until one night, I stood behind the door and noticed the hallway light motion sensor was on, but no one was in front of my door. The next day, I got a DM on Instagram from an unknown account. You live in my neighborhood, right? I blocked it immediately. That same day, my boyfriend was home. We heard the knocking again, but this time I found a letter I had thrown away in the junk mail box, except now it had writing on it. Instagram account name. Message me if you want to have some fun, or join me in the stairwell. 22 centimeters, smiley face. I freaked out. My boyfriend searched the building but didn't find anyone. He then went out to pick up my medication because I was too scared to leave. 2 minutes later, he texted me. Send me a picture of the letter quickly. A girl is going to knock on the door. Let her in. I had no idea what was happening, but I trusted him. A girl showed up, red face, tear stains, mascara running. She came in. We talked, and then she said, "The person who did all this, it's my boyfriend. I'm sorry for his behavior." I was shocked. She explained. He's obsessed with sex, cheats on her constantly, even with her aunt and her stepmother. Won't let her have a phone, and he's 29 while she's 19. They've been together since she was 15. Not exactly legal. Basically, super toxic guy. She was stuck. He had taken her only set of keys and her phone. So I kept her at my place, and we talked for hours. Eventually she reached him, and he told her to meet him in a place with no people and no cameras. Creepy. She said yes to calm him down, left at 9:30 p.m. Around midnight, she knocked on my door again just to say she got home safe. The next day, she told me she had bought a train ticket back to her family in the South, thanked me, and said I had been her wake-up call to leave him. And me? Once everything sank in, I realized. I've been stalked for days. I comforted the stalker's girlfriend, and I don't even feel safe in my own home anymore. Story 8. My father is a hole in the ground. I was raised in a backwoods town by a young single mother, the only friend I had for much of my childhood. She'd had me in her early teens, raising me entirely without help in the house her estranged parents had left behind when they skipped town, and without any responsibility to their daughter. "I don't need them," Mama always said. "All I ever wanted was you. I asked for a son, and you came to me. Isn't that a beautiful thing?" The neighbors thought my father to be some teenage boy my mother had gone with, or a husband that had strayed from his family, and had abandoned my mama as soon as I was born. We let them think so. As soon as I was old enough to understand things, my mother had taken me to visit my father in the forest, warning me never to go there on my own. "You could fall and end up hurt," Mama said, "or likely pester your daddy with questions or favors of some kind. You leave him in peace." Only she could be trusted to speak to my father, which she did as gently as any lover, kneeling down in the dirt by him. Her hands knotted in the grass. My father, you see, was a pit in the earth 6 feet long and wide. A well bucket hung on a length of rope over it, though there was no structure of any kind to suggest a hole had ever been used to draw water from. How deep it was I didn't know, for I had never seen the bottom of the well even on the brightest day, nor heard any of the stray stones or spilled earth that happened to fall into it reach its end. My mama told me she found my father in the woods as a young girl and had fallen for him from their first meeting, the strangeness of which I'd never dare question. They'd spend days and nights talking with each other, and though I'd never heard that hole speak in my presence, I always had the feeling or he was listening to us, that it looked on at where we stood over it. In conversation with him, my mother learned that if she placed something my father wanted in the well bucket and lowered it down the shaft, what came back up would be something different, something she had asked for in return. In that way, she made requests for all kinds of things. Food, mostly, in the beginning, then other necessities. Though never of such worth, she'd up and leave town with them. She loved my father with all her heart and swore she'd never leave his side. One day, Mama asked the hole to give her son, though what she offered in exchange she'd never say. For almost an hour, she sat waiting to pull the bucket back up. Then from the bottom of the well, she'd heard a baby cry and yanked on a rope till she had me in her arms. If my daddy's a pit in the dirt, I said once, then what does that make me? That's not what he is. My mother snapped at me. And besides, you're my boy, that's all. I don't want to hear you talk like that again, you hear? I understood from the murmurings I'd heard around town that there were a lot of things in that part of the country you weren't to speak of out loud, or if you did only in some sideways fashion to avoid bad luck of some kind. Being that I'd never made any friends, my exposure to other kinds of thinking was little to none. I didn't question the life I was living or where I'd come from for the longest time. When I'd watch my mama conversing with the hole or loading up that bucket with dead magpies in return for coins, I was only grateful I had a father that provided for us and expected so little in return. This couldn't last, of course, not when I got old enough to see my life for what it was and acknowledge that it was not right. I was 11 years old when it first occurred to me that I should fear my father, though the notion did not come to me of my own merit. Our furthest neighbors, the Gio family, had started showing an interest in me around that time, staring whenever I went by the house or making passing comments where before they kept their distance. They're cousins of ours, Mama said when I asked her about them. We don't have nothing to do with them folks. You leave them be. By then I'd learned that whenever my mother warned me away from something, it meant that there was some secret behind I wanted to know. So when, one day, Eddie Gio came out his front yard to talk to me, I lingered, curious about the man my mama had nothing but harsh words for. You take care of yourself out there in them woods, said Eddie, jerking his head in the direction of the trees. I've seen Beatrice taking you out there with her. She ought to know it ain't safe. I thought of the disquiet I felt around the pit, and the guilt that came afterwards from not loving my father the way Mama did. Eddie squinted at me, his tanned face lined with concern. You know what I'm talking about, don't you, Bertie? I shrugged. Mama had always told me to keep my mouth shut about my father if people came asking, and though she'd never so much as raised a hand to me, I was afraid of crossing her. All she'd have to do was give me a certain look, and I'd hush up or quit whatever it was that I was doing right away. Looking back, I suppose I had a fear she'd put me in the well bucket and ask my father to take me away again. She'd threatened to. After all, from time to time when I'd acted up, Eddie leant down over his fence, the wood creaking under his hands. Look, he said, if you ever want to get out of this place, just say the word, and I'll drive you out to city. We got family over there that'd take you in and won't mind where you came from. Mama don't want to move away, I said. She says she don't want to leave the forest behind. There was a sadness in Eddie's eyes then and something fearful, too. I ain't taking your mama nowhere, he said. Figure she ain't told you why our family don't talk no more. No, sir, I said. I hoped that he would tell me, filling in one of the many holes Mama had purposefully cut out her history, but he only turned and spat into a patch of wildflowers. You ask her sometime, he said, maybe she'll tell you the truth if you keep at her enough. She takes you out to that place. After all, you know what she's been fooling with. I didn't reply, only looked down to watch a spider crawling over a rock. We all knew not to go out there when we was all kids together, said Eddie. All the old folks told us stories about the goings-on there Used to be back before people knew better. But then some are just stupid and don't see no problem with what they do. Suddenly I couldn't resist my curiosity. "You're talking about the pit," I said, and Eddie nodded. "That's right. The well man, only there's no man down there. That's just all we knew to call it by. By the matter-of-fact logic of a child, I figured that if there wasn't any kind of man in that hole, then surely it couldn't be my father. But I believed what my mama had told me, had seen things brought up out of the black with my own eyes. What's in the well?" I asked. "Magic." "No," said Eddie. "Not the good kind, anyway. Some folks call your mama witch for dealing with that thing, but she's just a slave. Without her going to the well man or well king, can't get what it wants. It just sits, sleeping in the dirt, till somebody makes their way over there again. So it made Beatrice keep coming over, told her just what she wanted to hear, so she didn't know how it was playing her. I didn't like having the trees at my back, then, nor the pit, which though miles into that would seem closer now, as though it had heard its name and was eavesdropping on the two of us. "There's something down there in that hole," I said. "I hear it moving, sometimes, but I never saw it or nothing." "Hardly anybody does," said Eddie darkly. "Not unless they go down that well. And if they do, they ain't coming out, at least not as they were. So don't you think of doing it. Not even if your mama's with you." "I won't," I said. I meant it. I'd started to wonder what my mother did by that pit when I wasn't with her. And now I got to thinking about what had been sent down and brought up out of it in the past that had Eddie so afraid. "If it's not a man in there," I said, "what is it?" But Eddie had caught sight of my mother coming out of our front door and backed off across the yard and up onto the stoop out of sight. "You get along now," he said. "You just remember what I said, all right? I don't want to see you get yourself hurt." I wandered over to my mother's house before she saw me lingering by the Gil property and got wind that I'd broken one of her rules. She was stood waiting for me, swaying the way she always did when she was worked up about something. "Now, just where the hell have you been?" she asked. "I thought I told you to stay home today." "I got bored," I said honestly enough. "Sorry, Mama." She relaxed, but only slightly, fussing over me as though I'd been gone for days. "Don't do it again. I thought..." Here my mother glanced off out the window at the woods, catching herself a second too late. "Well, I thought you'd run off on me, that's all," she said. "You come on inside now." I did as she told me. But all the rest of that day into the night, I thought about my father, wondered if my mama had truly chosen to love him or if, like Eddie said, he'd made her feel that way. Somehow, I still cared for my mother. Felt sick at the thought of anything bad ever happening to her, or ever having to leave her. But speaking to Eddie had opened my eyes a way they'd never quite shut again, and I was drawn to him in the knowledge he had to give. I had to wait till Mama was sick with one of her headaches to see him a second time. Eddie's wife had just had a baby girl not long since, and when I passed their yard I saw Eddie holding her, pointing to a bird that had landed on a fence post. It flew off when I got near, and Eddie looked over at me, his smile falling. "Your mama ain't been letting you out of the house much lately," he commented. "I've been looking out for you. How you been holding up?" "Fine," I said. Eddie nodded. "You ain't been fooling around by that well, any?" "I know the way there," I said, "but I ain't ever been without Mama with me." I saw Eddie's shoulders ease slightly. "That's good. And it ain't ever let you see it, what's down there?" "Not even once." At this, Eddie seemed to make some kind of decision. "Hold on a minute." He took the baby inside the house and came out with a glass of orange juice which he held out to me. "Rose made a jug fresh," he said as I took it and drank. "Don't tell your mama I gave you any." I gave Eddie a look. "You don't like her, do you?" "I did when we was all growing up together," said Eddie. Then she turned strange. Started thinking she was hearing a man calling her out in them woods. I heard her telling her ma about it. "Sometimes it sounds like there's more than one man out there," she said, all calling my name. "Don't you go near," Aunt Jeanette told her. "No matter what you hear or what he tells you." But Beatrice wouldn't listen. She went on out there and met with the well, started dealing with it, brought all kinds of things. Only it was her it really wanted. The well king. They say it does something to them that serve it, brings something dark out in them. Makes them do worse and worse things until one day they go down that pit themselves to be with it and don't come back. I imagine my mother sitting in the well bucket, smiling as she lowered herself down into the shaft and felt a cold break out across me. Mama says he loves her, I said, and Eddie snorted. That thing down there ain't ever loved in his life. You ever seen him? No, and I'm glad I ain't. But I had an uncle that did. He said it was just like the stories. Scared him so bad, he never went back. Your mama, though, if she's seen it and stayed, she ain't never gonna leave. She'd go down that pit and take you in with her. She wouldn't, I said, without much certainty. Eddie sighed and sat down in a deck chair he had out in the yard. Back when she started seeing the well, King, her ma, and Pa were fixing to cover it over or close it up somehow, whatever they could to keep it from getting anybody. Figured maybe it'd die off if they did. They followed Beatrice out into the woods, and that was the last anybody saw of them. My mouth opened, but I couldn't ask a question on my tongue. Eddie answered it anyway. How she got them down that pit, I don't know. Pushed them, maybe, or killed them somehow and lowered them down after. All I know is when she came back, she had 2 mutt dogs with her, both of them vicious and crazy as anything. They'd bite folks, fight each other and neighbors' animals at all hours of night. Wound up both getting shot by somebody, and we all figured it was a mercy, the things that well King makes. Most of the time there's something wrong with them, or maybe it's they remember what they were, and it drives them mad. Alarmed, I asked, what about people? You ever hear about the pit making a person, and them being all right? Or are they bad too? A strangeness passed over Eddie's expression. I ain't heard enough about it to say. A lot of babies born over the years without a mother or father, a lot of them strange. Some of them turn to doing things you're too young to hear of. Ain't no way of knowing why they went that way, or if the pit had anything to do with it. My stomach turned with the same cold that was all around me. What is he? I asked. Eddie shrugged. They say you can see it for yourself if you ask it right. Take it some sort of gift, and it won't be so dark down there. It'll let you look. I understood from this that Eddie did not wish to tell me. For what reason I did not know. If he's got magic, why does he stay down there in the well all the time? I asked. Been down there so long in the dirt and the dark, it don't want to be no place else, said Eddie. Folks say it was born down there. Ended up fused with the walls so it couldn't climb itself out. And then, he paused, searching for the right words. It got all twisted up in its mind, too, so that it ended up with powers of some kind. Powers it used to bring people to it and play with them. That's all it's ever known. You ought to go see it yourself so you know I'm telling you the truth. Then you come by and see me again. Before I could say anything more, Eddie stood up, folded his chair in 2. I got to see to Marie. Rose has been rushed off her feet since she was born. I got to do my bit, now don't I? I was jealous. Suddenly, wishing I had a father like Eddie, not the hole in the earth I'd grown up with instead. But I only went away, saying nothing of this, only thinking Marie was lucky without her even knowing it yet. Again, I was slow to make any kind of move toward the well, half frozen with the guilt of everything I'd been doing behind Mama's back, and half afraid of what I was to find about myself in the pit. What stirred me to act in the end was my mother, and what I caught her at one afternoon when she thought I was playing the house, out of her way, as it was I'd seen her from a window, walking out the woods with a bundle in her arms, I guess was rags until a white arm stuck out the end of it. Seeing it, I remembered something she'd said that morning. How about we get a pig? A cute little pig we could raise, and then we can eat it right up when it gets too big to keep. I ran out to the tree lean after my mother, then, faster than I'd run all my life. Mama, I said, what are you doing with Marie? She jumped when she heard me, but her eyes were empty. No shame there in having been caught. No fear that I'd tell. She was in the yard, was all Mama said. So you just took her? I asked in amazement. You got to give her back. Please, Mama. For a minute, I thought she'd ignore me and keep on walking into those woods. But she must have figured I'd follow her, as in the end she strode back to the Guillot house and put the baby back in her stroller where it stood in the yard. Seeing her, Eddie and his wife started yelling and cursing, anger in their voices like I'd never heard before or since. Mama just stood there, her face still blank. taking every harsh word they had for her without saying a single one in return. Eddie glanced over at me, and I accepted that what he'd said was true. My mother wasn't right in the head, and was only getting worse as time went by. She didn't care what anyone thought of her, only for herself and the pit she'd married. Even I couldn't reach her anymore. Still, I tried. "You gotta stop going out there, Mama," I said. "Daddy ain't good, like you think. If he was, he wouldn't ask you to give him that baby." "He gave me you," she said quietly. "Who am I to argue with what he wants?" I let her go. After that, so disturbed that all I could do was watch as she slid away between the trees. I knew then that I had no choice but to do as Eddie had told me and try to learn from the Well King what he was, and who I was in turn. I couldn't have left town not knowing, and though the pit had never talked to me, I had learned from my mother what things were considered high value to trade. There were chickens in our yard she kept to feed us. I caught 3 of them and put them in a box with holes in it, thinking my father would be more agreeable to answering my questions if I kept him fed. "The stomach's the way to a man's heart," Mama said once. "Your daddy's no different in that way." Being that flashlights and lamps my mama had taken the well on gloomy days had never touched it, I didn't bother bringing either. The dark was part of my father, and I had some idea he'd move it apart so that I could see inside. The walk out to the pit was hard, my arms wrapped tight around the box, slowing me down. The noise the chickens made seemed so loud in the quiet of the wood, I was sure the Well King must have known that I was coming, waiting for me out there in the earth with the patience only something old and strong can know. When I got to him, I felt the usual grim presence surrounding the pit, tugging at me like a chain. I was careful putting the squirming chickens in the well bucket, which was bigger than any use to pull water up, being nearly as wide as the hole itself. I kept thinking I'd lose my balance and pitch down over the edge, clinging to the frame the bucket hung from with a hysterical grip. "I brought you something to eat," I said to the pit as bravely as I could manage. "Can you show me what my mama gave you make me with?" "She won't say. I hope the birds are enough. I don't have anything else." As usual, the well didn't answer me. But I began to lower the bucket anyway, watching the chickens flap their wings against the side of it with a squeeze of guilt. Soon the dark took them in, and I felt to give us something pulling at the bucket, heard the squawk of the birds as it grabbed on. Feathers fluttered up from the well shaft, some of them stained to tips with blood. My mouth was rancid with bile, and still I stood bravely drawing the rope back up, sensing a new weight on the end of the line. As I tugged hard on it, daylight touched the bucket, and I saw that it had been filled up with rodent skeletons, their tiny skulls ending in curved white teeth that flashed in the sun. I sat down hard by the pit, feeling dirt and grass come loose under my fingernails as I scrambled back from the edge. Tears fell down my face, provoked by shock and revulsion and bewilderment. "What am I?" I asked. "What are you?" At last a voice came up from the bottom of the shaft, more like the primal shrieks of some wilderness animal than anything human. "You are my son," it said, "and I—" As I watched the black of the well dissipated before my eyes like something in a dream. Only I'd never dreamed anything like what I saw down there, not even when I woke myself up screaming sometimes. Pressed tight to the walls of the pit were hundreds of rats, some so small that their bodies were crushed and deformed by the weight of their brothers against them, others nearly as big as dogs, raising their heads to look at me with crazed but intelligent eyes. At the heart of the well, all their tails were knotted up together in a pink ball of flesh that throbbed like a beating heart, and beneath them lay what was left both of people and animals, all eaten down to their bones. What living creatures had been sent back up in the bucket in place of those things had their broken souls in them, and nothing more, for nothing more was left. The Well King, Rat King, watched me with his many heads, and I stumbled further back in the hole, aware that I remembered being rats too, once, deep inside me, and like a rat I ran. I went straight over to Eddie's house, soaked so badly with sweat that it looked like I had been caught in the rain, and so exhausted from how fast I'd gone through the woods that I had no air left to speak with. Eddie came out to meet me like he'd been expecting me to call, and put a hand on my shoulder. "You saw it," he said simply. I nodded. He didn't ask anything more, only walked me round his truck and opened the door for me to get in. As he pulled out onto the road, I saw my mother standing by, watching us go without trying to intervene. She looked beaten down by defeat. The lost little girl she must have been all those years ago when she traded for me. What became of her after I left that day, I never tried to learn, not wanting to know whether the townsfolk had taken things into their own hands and killed her like her dogs, or, like the other servant of the well, she'd gone down to the Rat King to be with what she loved even in death. I'm fortunate. I never felt her need to serve. That learning what I was disgusted me rather than making me feel any kinship with that creature. The rest of my childhood was spent living with an uncle I had in the city, a good man that, like Eddie had promised, didn't poke around into my past, only accepted me as I was, and even taught me a trade. He made me the man I am, one as good as he is, I hope. But as hard as I work, and as clean as I try to live, I've never been able to shake the crawling, dirty feeling of meeting my father, or of learning what I was built from. I keep waiting for something to rot inside me, like it did the other creatures the Rat King made, but it's been 20 years since I saw his many faces. If he's in me, still he works slow. Story 9. The Boy in My Backyard. Hi! This might be a bit long, but I feel like I need to tell someone about this. Looking back after everything that happened, I realized that my childhood was a bit different from most, and only now do I understand just how frightening and dangerous all of these situations really were. I was around 6 years old, so if I don't remember many details, I ask for your forgiveness. I'll try my best to explain everything as clearly as I can, and not make it as confusing as it was. I'm traveling while writing this, but when I get back I'll clarify some doubts and talk to my mom to better understand everything that happened. Back to the story. I was around 6 years old, and my mom had taken my brother to hospital because he had a high fever. It was probably related to the previous night, when we had been playing in the park under the rain. This was one of the few times I stayed home alone, but my childlike mind didn't worry much. I just wanted to figure out what to do to pass the time. Mom had warned me several times not to leave the house while she was gone, and never, under any circumstances, to open the door for strangers. She also said she would call after a while to check on me and make sure everything was okay. She left in a hurry. It was around 9 a.m. when she went out, leaving me alone at home. I think I spent most of the time watching cartoons on TV, though I don't remember exactly. But after my mom's first call to check if I was okay, I was already really bored. Without my brother, we were a team and always went on little adventures together, and unable to go outside, the day felt slow and gray. I was in the kitchen, playing with my little cars, pushing them across the wooden floor, seeing how fast I could make them go. Then I noticed some movement outside, a sound coming from the backyard. The kitchen had a large glass door that led out to the backyard, a big yard fully fenced, with a small wooded area behind it. Curious, I decided to see what it was. At that point, even the tiniest thing would have been the perfect excuse to break my boredom. The backyard was fairly large, but there wasn't much there, just grass that probably needed mowing, since my mom never had time for it. Slightly to the left stood a tree, not very tall, but it had been part of countless games, like climbing. On it hung a swing that my mom had finally installed for us after much insistence. Carved into the tree was a drawing of our family, me, my mom, and my brother. Above it were our initials and a heart. If the noise came from there weren't many places to hide. Behind the tree, it was hard to see from a distance, but once you noticed, it became clear. There was a pair of hands. I got scared, let out a terrified scream, and ran back inside toward the phone in the living room. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Finally, I called my mom. She would know how to handle this. For some reason, she didn't answer, no matter how many times I tried. Giving in to my curiosity, I peeked through the kitchen's glass door that looked out to the backyard. The kitchen was just past the living room, with no divider, only a fairly wide hallway. And then I saw him, a boy leaning against the glass, staring at me, one hand raised in a wave. He looked about my age, maybe a little older, but not much. His blonde hair was messy, and his clothes were dirty and torn. The boy seemed to be calling me over, and I don't know what came over me, but I dropped the phone and walked toward him. I was still a little scared, trying not to get too close, partially hiding behind a chair. "What's your name?" I asked, but he didn't answer, giving only a neutral look. He kept beckoning me closer with his hand, but I kept bombarding him with questions. How did he get here, and what did he want? Ran through my mind, though there were much better questions I could have asked, like why his clothes were dirty and torn. But no matter what I said, he didn't respond. He didn't open his mouth, as if he couldn't. Can you talk? I asked, now more curious and scared. He confirmed my suspicion by shaking his head from side to side, giving me the information I needed. But what could a child who couldn't speak possibly want with me? I asked how he had gotten there, and he just shrugged, as if he didn't know either. I noticed he kept staring at the door handle, as if silently begging me to open it, but I couldn't. Just imagining how furious my mom would be if she found out made my heart race. He seemed to understand that I wouldn't let him in, so he started moving away, heading toward the swing. There he stayed, swaying back and forth, perhaps enjoying himself. I really need to go to the bathroom, but I didn't want to lose sight of him. I locked the door and ran to the bathroom, trying to buy time. When I came back, he was still there, now just sitting on the swing, looking a little sad. I felt sorry for him. Maybe he just wanted a friend. At least, that's what I told myself. Do you want me to push you? I called from inside, but the boy didn't respond, not even glancing at me. I felt a little insulted. I was offering help, and he didn't even care. I opened the door and walked toward him, barefoot on the damp grass, repeating the question. This time he looked back, but still didn't answer. He simply stared. His eyes followed me as I finally got close enough. Do you want me to push you? I asked again, a little annoyed, wanting a clear answer. All I got was a hesitant nod. So I pushed him. He gripped the rope tightly, eyes wide, and then he smiled. For a moment, I forgot how strange the situation was. I was playing with a boy who had appeared in my backyard, without even knowing his name. I noticed he had a slightly scraped knee, and his gray clothes, originally white, hid several marks. The one that caught my attention most was on his neck, sometimes covered by his long hair. For a moment, I almost mistook him for a girl. A purple mark, whose origin I had no idea of, remained a mystery, though it didn't really matter, since he couldn't talk. I set aside my curiosity, stopped the swing, and asked him to push me this time. He didn't hesitate, and did so willingly. From a distance, it looked like just two kids playing, but anyone aware of the context would find it unsettling. I spent some time there with him on the swing, lying on the grass and telling him some of the adventures I'd had with my brother. He seemed genuinely interested, but I couldn't ignore the nervousness etched on his face. It was strange. I heard the phone ring in the background. My mom was probably calling to check if I was okay. I started to get ready to go back inside, but he held me back. He seemed uneasy, scared, or afraid of something. He gestured as if begging for something, but no sound came out. Maybe he was afraid I would tell my mom about him, which made sense. With a lot of effort and careful miming, he suggested a game where we had to climb the tree. I was skilled at it, and he couldn't reach the top alone. We spent another 30 minutes there. I tried teaching him to climb, but after a few branches, he became too scared to continue. I had to show him how it was done, climbing almost the entire tree myself. From the top, I spotted my mom's car turning onto the street. She had arrived. I hid quickly. If she saw me there, I'd be in serious trouble. I had been told countless times not to climb the tree, even if I claimed to be an expert. With the skills I had, I could probably have pursued a career in it. I climbed down and told my friend to hide until I could bring my mom inside. He nodded, still cautious, never taking his eyes off the house. I ran in and waited in the living room. When my mom came in, she seemed completely unaware of anything. She asked if everything was okay, and I joked that it couldn't be better. She walked toward the kitchen, then suddenly froze. Something had startled her. She ran back to the living room and stared at me. "Son, where's the..." She was cut off by a loud crash. The kitchen door glass shattered. We ran to see what had happened, but my mom stopped me from going further because of all the glass shards. She went outside to check. I was afraid she'd find the boy, but apparently she didn't. My heart was racing as I tried to figure out what had happened, until I looked down. Among the shards lay a stone. As I stared at it, I heard a car screeching tires and speeding away in the distance. My mom heard it too and ran, crossing the house to try and spot the car, but it was gone. She took me out of the house, and we waited together for the police, whom she had called. Poor my brother. He was still feeling unwell, sleeping in our mom's car, barely aware of what happened. My mom told the police everything. They were looking for a suspicious-looking car. My friend was gone. I didn't tell her about the boy at the time, but later, when I mentioned him, her face turned pale with fear. She couldn't believe what I had said, and asked a question that still haunts me. "Were you with the boy in the backyard the whole time?" she asked. I told her, basically, yes, I had spent most of the time with him, only coming back inside when she arrived. She paused and took a deep breath. "Did you answer my call?" she asked, incredulous. I explained that I had missed it, because the boy was afraid I'd tell about him. That was enough to make my mom go pale, and the three of us ended up spending the night at a relative's house. Only later did I learn what had happened. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but my mom noticed the kitchen knives were missing. Later, while the police were still there, she saw that all the bedrooms had been ransacked. Her question about the call wasn't random. I really hadn't answered the last one, yet she said someone had. The person hadn't said a word. At first, she thought it was some joke I had played, but after seeing the state of the house, she realized the gravity of it all. And the reason we spent the night away was that our spare key was missing. Story 10. This little piggy went to market. My twin sister, Liz, told me one afternoon in the backyard of our new house that something pulled on her pinky toe in the attic room. The attic was converted into a guest room by the previous owners. Occasionally my sister would sleep in there with our parents' permission, so we weren't always in the same shared bedroom. We have an older brother who occupied the smaller but private bedroom naturally. I think it may be a gnome or something, she said while making spooky faces at me. "Boo boo," she shouted, grabbing my shoulders. "The gnome comes out sometimes, then tickles your feet," Liz said before skipping away singing, "This little piggy went to market." Liz loved to scare me. The weird, malformed tree that loomed over the house made her gnome story seem almost believable somehow. A stiff wind blew the tree, and I ran inside the house. On a dare, I slept in the room one night. For some reason, I imagined the attic would turn into that magical village from the movie Troll. No such thing happened, but the attic was quiet, pleasant even, with a nice overhead lamp that was perfect for reading before bed. I closed my book and shut off the light. As I was dozing off, something grabbed my pinky toe, gently, followed by a scurrying noise and muffled giggling. Then I saw something run down the curved attic steps. Liz, wearing a black robe or something. That fucking witch. Okay, you got me. "I saw you last night after you snuck in and pulled on my toe," I said the next morning at breakfast. "I don't know what you're talking about," Liz replied, scooping frosted flakes into her lying face. One night when she was sleeping in the attic, I silently crept up there and put fake Halloween spiders on her bed, underneath the blanket, on the floor. The next morning, though, the spiders were in a pile next to my bed, -1. At breakfast, Liz played it cool, like she wasn't aware of the prank the previous night, and no acknowledgement of her retaliation. I knew she kept with the spiders and would try to scare me somehow. That scare never materialized, though. I was never really satisfied with my spider prank, but something inexplicable lingered in my mind about it for years. We grew older, entered high school, and Liz formally moved into the attic room. Liz started to hang with her cool friends and seeing boys. Our parents were too aloof and too much into their own stuff to notice. Liz sometimes didn't come home on weekends. I couldn't tell either. When her fucking hipster friends came over, I was never invited to join them. I'd hear the pitter-patter of feet sometimes. That really was the only indication that Liz was home. That sound somehow gave me comfort. Liz was home and not having fun with her friends somewhere. I preferred to stay home and read, while Liz spent weekends at friend houses or attending parties. Liz's nights out were frequent enough I began inviting friends over for company. That friend would usually stay in the attic room. Well, only one friend really, Rebecca, my chess partner at school. She came by one Saturday night around Halloween. We played chess and talked about boys until midnight. Sometime during that night, someone hurriedly came into my room and jumped into Liz's old bed, throwing the blanket over their head. Liz came home and was probably drunk again. Something pulled on my toes last night. Rebecca said the next morning, it was probably just Chompers playing with you. Chompers is our family cat, a gray nuisance that only came into the house occasionally for food and treats. Then I saw Liz coming down the stairs. It all made sense now. Okay, you got Rebecca too, I said to Liz when she entered the kitchen. Rebecca knew about the gnome, but didn't believe a word of it. What are you talking about? Liz replied, studying her face. She seemed hungover and really was confused about what we were talking about. The conversation went nowhere. Rebecca ran upstairs to grab her things and left. She never came back to that house ever again after that. The party years of early high school quickly passed. Liz got more serious about her education and spent more time at home. After graduation, she left for university education upstate. I stayed home, attended a local art college, and moved into the attic room. I turned the old bedroom into a studio/art space. Looking out the attic window at the weird tree in the backyard, I opened the nightstand drawer. My missing copy of The Hobbit was in there with a small stack of Polaroids of the interior of the attic sitting on top. I picked up the pile and jumped when I saw what was underneath, the missing spider from my prank 12 years ago. Okay, Liz, you got me again. Fucking bitch. She got me with my own prank. I laughed, though. I almost picked up the phone to call her, but decided against it. But I called her the next day. I asked, you put that pile of fake spiders next to my bed back when we were kids, right? Liz denied any knowledge, no matter how many times I pushed. I did not put spiders next to your bed, SIS damn, she finally yelled. A short silence, then we both laughed out loud. Still, I didn't believe her. She's good. I recalled something our father said to me while discussing me moving into the attic after Liz left for school. I was on the stair landing, and I swear I saw something dart from our room to the attic staircase. My dad said, looking pale. He continued, it was dark and it moved fast, emphasizing fast. My parents' bedroom faced the stairs to the attic. I honestly didn't know how to reply at the time. Maybe it was Chompers? I said, but Chompers is bright gray fur. It was bigger than no damn cat, he replied. That night, I stayed up late reading The Hobbit, eventually falling asleep with the book on my chest, my feet hanging off the bed. Something pulled on my pinky toe. This jolted me up, but only long enough to see the closet door slowly shutting. Being between sleep and wakefulness, hypnagogia, it was surreal. I wasn't sure if I really saw the door closing and went back to sleep. The next day I found myself singing, This Little Piggy Went to Market on my way to class. During lunch, I pulled out the Polaroids that were stacked on top of the Hobbit book, about 7 in total. In each photo the room was dark, but with camera flash on, I shuffled through this deck of creepy photos until I locked eyes on one. At the bottom of the photo are 2 eyes peering to the closet door, sideways, reflecting the flash of the camera, long, dark skinny fingers gripping the edge of the door.